Coming up on Network Africa, a South Korean warship heads to Somalia for an anti-piracy drill. UK troops arrive in South Sudan to provide engineering and medical aid. And Algerians are set to elect new members of parliament amid high voter apathy. Hello there, welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We begin in the Horn of Africa. A South Korean warship is heading to Somalia to hold an anti-piracy drill in waters off the country's coast. The 4,400-ton destroyer left the South Korean port of Busan yesterday with 300 crew on board. Friday's drill will involve the destroyer, known as Daejo Young, a 17,000-ton commercial vessel, and 350 seamen and sailors. The country has had a naval unit in the Gulf of Aden since 2009 as part of global efforts to combat piracy off the coast of Somalia. Well, at least 8 soldiers have died in Mali after suspected Islamist militants ambushed troops while they were traveling in a convoy. No group was named and no one has claimed responsibility for the attack on Tuesday. This comes after the government extended a state of emergency at the weekend in response to the militants who've launched a number of attacks recently. Last month, French forces backing the government said they killed or captured 20 militants near the border with Burkina Faso. Meanwhile, dozens of British troops have arrived in Juba to provide engineering and medical support to the United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS. They are also expected to help ease the delivery of humanitarian aid. South Sudan, the world's youngest nation, plunged into civil war in 2013, just 2 years after independence from neighboring Sudan and after President Salva Kiir fired his deputy, Riek Machar. The conflict has split the nation along largely ethnic lines, and the United Nations has warned of a possible genocide. More than 3 million people have fled their homes out of a population of 12 million.
When we're finally up to strength, we'll be close to 400 personnel. At the moment, we're at about 220, 230. Over the next month, we'll have a series of flights arriving in South Sudan, which will get us up to full strength, hopefully by the end of May. Primarily, we'll be here to improve the security and the physical infrastructure of those bases. So it could include accommodation, it could include security fencing, watchtowers, roads, drainage. Some projects in particular we're looking at is to improve the helicopter landing sites at both Malakal and Bentiu, and also there are improvements that we think we can make to the jetty in Malakal, which is clearly a crucial way of getting stores and supplies to Malakal for both, for all of the departments within the UN and for some of the humanitarians as well.
6 journalists marching in support of World Press Freedom Day have been arrested in the Ugandan capital, Kampala. Local media reports say one journalist for Urban TV was beaten and his trousers torn, with officers throwing him to the ground, treading on him and putting him onto a waiting police truck. Thankfully, all the journalists have now been released without charge. Meanwhile, as Nigeria joins the rest of the world to mark the Press Freedom Day, the 2017 World Press Freedom Index has placed the country at 122 out of 180 countries. That's down 6 places since last year. The report was put together by a non-governmental organization, Reporters Without Borders. Let's get more on this story from the head of the African desk at Reporters Without Borders, Claire Khan-Shriver, who joins us live from Paris. You're welcome to the program.
Yes, good evening.
Nigeria dropped down 6 places to 122 on the World Press Freedom Index. That's for 2017. What do you think is responsible for this drop?
Well, the situation in Nigeria of journalism is one marred by daily occurrences of violence against journalists and the media. There seems to be a general suspicion, let's say, even a disregard for the media, both from authorities, but also sometimes from the population itself, that can turn very violently against the media. And we've seen over the past year several arrests of journalists, acts of violence, and the problem is that those are met in general with impunity. So there is no sanction for violence against journalists, and this is what can explain the fall of Nigeria on the index.
Which countries in Africa would you say are doing quite well when it comes to press freedom then?
Well, the top country in terms of press freedom on our index is Namibia, where a very strong constitutional framework guarantees press freedom. In the past 25 years, there's only been 2 journalists reportedly attacked or manhandled. Both security forces, intelligence forces on a daily basis allow journalists to do their work, and there's a certain level of guaranteed pluralism of the media. So that's.
In the 2017 World Press Freedom Index, RSF did note an alarming decline in press freedom, not only in the United States, but also in Canada. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, in Canada, what happened in 2016 is that Quebec journalists realized that they had been on wire from the authorities since 2013. And there's been several attacks against independence of the media and protection of media sources through mandates of surveillance against certain journalists and trials for them to reveal their sources. So that explains the fall of Canada on the index this year.
Finally, what can Nigeria and other African countries do to boost their level of media freedom? We can also take into consideration what happened in Uganda, where journalists were arrested for marching on World Press Freedom Day.
I think there's a very high level of lack of knowledge from security forces about the role of journalists and about what they serve as a purpose in society. So training of security forces on the role of the media is a must, both in Nigeria, but also, as you said, in Uganda, where they were arbitrarily arrested. And there needs to be in Nigeria a strong message from the central government to provincial governors to not only implement media freedom, but also to prosecute attacks